views and opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium.
Just lift your eyes up, let your wise rise up, see the signs of the times. If it's time, rise up, when death and hell dwell among all God's people, when those we chose and trusted have become completely corrupted and inherently evil, when the feast that feeds you starves our father's children, when snuff, porn, and pedo forms begin to get top billing, rise up when famine claims millions, when justice gives blind eyes to billions, when the Lord's anger is no longer feared, if his protection is gone and your enemies are near, if you've seen the seas spill over and the mountains shake, break, and fall, if the moon ever turns blood red and you can't see the sun at all, rise up.
Peace and welcome to New Abolitionist Radio on the Black Talk Radio Network, a program that seeks to educate, inform, and agitate on the issue of 21st century legalized slavery, hosted by social activist and spoken word poet Max Parthas with New Abolitionist and Actionist Yohanan Elia and Black Talk Media Project founder Scotty Reed. On this program, we discuss recent news on legalized 21st century slavery and human trafficking, along with projects and people who help combat it. Today is the April 12th broadcast in this fifth consecutive year of New Abolitionist Radio. We're 15 weeks into the insanity called a Trump administration and literally on the brink of a world war that could erupt at any moment. On this day, in 1861, the American Civil War began when General P.G.T. Beauregard opened fire on the Union-held Fort Sumter in South Carolina's Charleston Bay. 2 days later, U.S. President Abraham Lincoln issued a proclamation calling for 75,000 volunteer soldiers to quell the Southern insurrection. All of this began over the issue of legalized slavery. Also, as we mentioned at the end of last week's broadcast, some 20,000 convicted drug offenders in Massachusetts will have their cases thrown out because of a rogue state police chemist who brazenly fabricated evidence. We're keeping you updated. Later, we'll listen to a video from a friend of ours by the name of David Culma. David is running as the Green candidate for Congress in the special election on June 20th, 2017 for South Carolina's Congressional District 5. You really should hear what he has to say about modern-day slavery. In the news, senators seek to reform the justice system nationwide by launching the National Criminal Justice Commission. They say the scope of the review is vast, involving all aspects and all areas of the criminal justice system. We'll add our voices and opinions as abolitionists. Then, in the case known as Menacol versus Geo Group, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, TVPA, is being used in an anti-slavery lawsuit. The suit could be used as a basic template for other litigation challenging the use of slave labor through incarceration. This is the first time a private prison contractor has been sued for violating the TVPA. We're watching and reporting. If time allows, we want you to hear a chilling message from the Lake County Sheriff Office Community Engagement Unit. You really should see the video as well. But if you didn't think we were in the Twilight Zone before, you will now. Tonight we begin a brand new segment called For Freedom's Sake, a history of rebellion. And it's pretty apt that we begin it on the anniversary of the Civil War beginning. This new For Freedom's Sake, a history of rebellion, begins with the Stono Rebellion, the catalyst that spawned the Negro Act of 1740. A rider of the 21st century Underground Railroad is Roosevelt Glenn, who was convicted in a 1989 gang rape case and has been exonerated after serving 16 years in prison. Our abolitionist and profile this week will be provided by Scotty Reed. Time is short, so are tempers, so let's go. If you got a question or comment, you can call us toll free at 1-866-510-9025. And if you want to chat with others in our private chat room, you can log in at uberconference.com/Black Talk Radio Network. Once again, I'm Max Parthas. What's happening, Brother Scotty?
Hey, what's going on, Max? What's going on, listeners? Good to be with you tonight. Feeling a little bit under the weather with some sort of stomach virus from something I ate, but I'm going to do my best to hang in there. Hopefully we'll have Johannin joining us shortly so he can pick up some of my slack tonight.
Word, man. Hopefully you feel better. And just a tip, never eat sardines, ever. Ever, period. But, yeah, man. You know, we got an anniversary coming up, too, we were just talking about. Amazing coincidences with it as well. June 13th, coming up in a couple months away, will be the 5th anniversary of New Abolitionist Radio. It's also the anniversary of the signing of the 14th Amendment. And it's the anniversary, as I mentioned earlier, Scotty, of Prismatic Dreams, which was founded in 1999, and it is one of the oldest and largest spoken word organizations in America.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah, that is pretty slick, man.
I was thinking about the other day just how long we've been on air with New Abolitionist Radio. You know, there's many programs that have come and go on the Black Talk Radio Network, but this is one of the ones that have definitely stuck around with a focus on of fulfilling a mission, and that mission is using this new media technology to tell the world that the United States been lying for the last 150 years about abolishing slavery, and that Lincoln really got really betrayed the Union soldiers who had joined the military specifically. I'm not talking about the ones that were drafted fresh off the boat, as we've seen, you know, Irish coming over here and then being drafted into the military. But no, I'm talking about the hundreds of thousands of formerly enslaved Africans who had left the plantations and made their way north to join the Union Army, as well as the free blacks who picked up the arms, seeing it as a chance to free their brothers and sisters in bondage. And awful interestingly, you want to talk about coincidence? I got banned from Facebook today. I got put in jail for like 24 hours. Because a post I made had some language in it that they said violated their community guidelines. And in this post, I was talking about the 13th Amendment and how Lincoln had betrayed those Union troops when he sat down with Confederates and allowed them some input into writing the 13th Amendment. I mean, once I found that out, I was like, no wonder that loophole is in there. Of course it is. Of course it is. And so I felt like, you know, from military standpoint, me being former military, that was actually high treason. You know, he was the commander in chief. I looked at that as high treason against every abolitionist soldier. And what, you know, what do they do to people who commit acts of treason? Well, they execute them. And I said, you know, and I talked about him being just like the rest of them racist crackers. So apparently they don't like the term. I suspect they didn't say, but racist crackers, because I can't imagine them taking issue with anything else. But people do take issue with this very program. So, but I lived in the South. I was born in the South. I didn't create the word cracker. And if some people is offended by that word, then I will point you to the First Amendment. But I also tell you, well, look up the definition. There are several definitions. The racist white male who was cracking the whip on his victims was called a cracker by some people. Also, it's a Southern cultural designation. Not the rich, wealthy aristocracy, or the slave how you say that? Somebody made up that term, and I like it. Slave to crassity. Anyway, you know, the antebellum landowners and what have you. No, not talking about them. Talking about the poor crackers who joined to give their lives to keep black folks in chains. So apparently Facebook got a problem with the word cracker. I don't know what they took issue with, but I posted nothing but the truth. Lincoln was a racist. He said he didn't think, if it was up to Lincoln, people like Max wouldn't even exist. So, though I got banned, I got put in jail for 24 hours a day. But that's one of the reasons we created BTRcommunity.com, a new online social network for a new online black experience. Max, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go on that rant.
I understand, brother. I've been lucky. For some reason, I've never been suspended even for a day. And I've been on Facebook now for like 8 years. I don't know why it is. Everybody around me tends to get suspended for the most innocent things, it seems like. Maybe I've just been lucky. I don't know.
Well, I don't see what I expect to be. Let me say this. I'm actually surprised. This is my first time being suspended, but I ain't complaining about it, because, I'm only on there as a propagandist. And I openly admit I'm a propagandist, but I'm not propagandizing you with lies. I'm propagandizing the masses with truth. And so, the truth has always been attacked by the great deceivers and what have you, but it's their platform. Just like, I built Black Talk Radio Network, BTRcommunity.com. It's, they built it, it's theirs. And that is why we've been preparing for those type of things when they want to censor, speech like that. I didn't mean cracker in a racist way. I'm talking about racist crackers. So whatever, I'm not going to fight with them. Don't go complaining to Facebook on my behalf. I'll sit in jail for 24 hours and continue to post content through their networks through my workarounds.
But what you mentioned about Lincoln, I shared a video on New Abolitionist Radio where Barack Obama sat with students and explained to them how Lincoln betrayed all blacks with the Emancipation Proclamation. And as an expert on the Constitution, he should know. And he was the president at the time. You should check that out. Also, I just want to give a shout out to my wife. Her and I just celebrated 30 years of marriage. This past Monday. 30 years together, man. We've seen some wonderful events, people, and done some amazing things throughout our lifetime. So,
yeah, congratulations. The longest I ever lasted in a relationship was 5 years. So 30, man.
There's some things you can't teach, man. You don't get 30 years of marriage in a rush. There's no shortcuts. You got to go through the whole 30 years, man. It's not something you can teach. It's just something that God either blesses you with or you don't. But it takes a lot of work, man. It takes a lot of work the last 30 years. Fortunately, we've been in love the entire time, so we've never really had any issues with arguments and problems and jealousies and things like that. So it's been a beautiful road these 30 years, man. 30 years, raised 10 children, got 15 grandchildren. 4 of those kids wasn't even ours. They just needed raising. 15 grandchildren with a 16th on the way already. At this rate, in about 100 years, we would represent a very big chunk of America. Got me feeling like Abraham up in here. But anyway, man, let's get into our stories. Is Johanna on the line with us yet? All right. Well, our first story, we ended with last week because it was breaking news that just came in. And we've been keeping up to date with this story since it began. It's the story of Annie Dukin. And Annie Dukin only represents one individual lab technician. Through our own research, we found that at least 14 states in the Union provide cash incentives to either the department or the individuals for every positive drug and alcohol report that they provide. So there's an incentive to provide positive drug reports, regardless of whether or not the person is innocent or whatever. And this one woman was doing it for years. And as I said, she represents just one out of 14 states with entire lab departments. And Annie Dukin is out of Massachusetts. As we've told you so far, she was found out, she was tried, she was arrested, she was tried, she was convicted. She spent less than 2 years in jail or in prison for what she did. She's walking free right now. And we've heard reports that say as many as 60,000 people were wrongly affected by her lab findings and submissions. 60,000 people. But here in this article from the Huffington Post, they mentioned about 20,000 convicted drug offenders cases will get thrown out thanks to this rogue chemist. So it's possible there's still a lot of people that are sitting up in jails and prisons or have had their lives destroyed by this woman who will never see their cases come to light. So I'm praying for you guys. Hopefully someone reaches out and finds a way to help you.
And didn't you say she only got 3 years?
She was out in less than 2 years, Scotty.
No.
Less than 2 years.
Yeah.
I think she did like 18 months.
I wonder what's the combined number of years of her victims. Maybe in the thousands, over 1,000 years, a whole damn century.
Possible. You're talking about up as many as 60,000 people. And here they got 20,000 of them that, are dealing with prison cases. So, convictable prison cases. So this is, that's a lot of time that she's responsible for that was stolen from people's lives. Let me read some of this HuffPost story. It says, some 20,000 convicted drug offenders in Massachusetts will likely have their cases thrown out because of a rogue state police chemist who brazenly fabricated evidence. What we're told is somewhere between 500 and 1,000 cases, the ones they think are serious, will be kept. Carl Williams, staff attorney for the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, told the Huffington Post. Former chemist Annie Dukin has been falsifying test results and tampering with evidence for nearly 10 years. Wow, dude, you've been doing this for a decade. Anyway, when she was fired in 2012 from her job at a Boston lab operated by the Department of Public Health, an investigation that year questioned the validity of her work. And in 2013, she pled guilty to multiple charges, including 17 counts of obstruction of justice and 8 counts of tampering with evidence. Williams said Dukin was involved in roughly 24,000 questionable drug cases involving about 20,000 defendants. The cases were prosecuted in the Bristol, Cape and Islands, Essex, Middlesex, Norfolk, Plymouth, and Suffolk districts. So if you've had a case that involved drug or alcohol in those districts, you should be calling your lawyers. The district attorney's offices have until April 18th to notify the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court which among the cases involving Dukin can be realistically be retried. According to the Boston Globe, prosecutors have yet to comment on how many cases they plan to fight or to pursue. However, Middlesex County Assistant District Attorney Robert J. Bender, at a recent meeting with Associate Justice Margaret Botsford of the State Supreme Judicial Court, said the numbers are in line with Williams' account. Without putting numbers on it, it's in the ballpark that the court was looking for, Bender told Botsford on March 16th, according to the Boston Globe. Hundreds of cases, not thousands of cases. But I'm not going to read the rest of this story. You see where it's going now. She got found out. They know how many people are involved, and now they're trying to reduce the number of people that they have to address. Because this is a lot of people with potential lawsuits, a lot of money that it could cost the entire system. So it's in their best interest not to set you free, to see you as a person that they don't even want to talk about it, who was just screwed over, and let's forget about it. That's a lot of lawsuits, Scotty.
Well, you know, Max, now multiply Annie Dukins by 50. If I was a betting man, I would bet you that there are many Annie Dukins, because I can recall one here in North Carolina. He worked in the state crime lab. Believe his name was Dwayne Devers, if my memory serves me correctly. And this guy came out of college with a degree in zoology, and he ended up being the head of the forensic crime lab. And he wasn't just he wasn't dealing with drug tests or anything like that, but he would find ketchup. One example they gave was that he tested something that the investigators thought was blood in a vehicle in a murder case, and it was ketchup. But he falsified the record saying it was blood, and he would basically just fit his reports, his forensic reports, to fit whatever the investigators was looking for, depending on whoever. And I don't even think he ever was prosecuted or with the jail. I just can't recall right now. I know he's no longer the SBI crime lab head anymore. So Andy Dukins is not an anomaly.
It's a shame, man, that so many people have been victimized, and now they're trying to ignore their lives. Like, we destroyed your lives because of the potential that you could sue the state. We're not going to really mess around with you. We're going to leave you in the dark and let you go ahead and serve this sentence out, which you never did anything convicted. It's amazing, man. People wonder why freedom is at the top of the list for us as abolitionists. I mean, if we're not doing it for freedom and peace, then what are we doing it for? You know, you could talk justice reform all day long, but if nobody's getting out of their damn cells, it ain't reform. I mean, you ain't reforming nothing. You're just letting criminals walk away free. This is, I would rank as one of the top 2-story scandals that really shows you the heart of the corruption going on and shows you a microcosm example in a particular state of how this is all across America. The other one would be the Kids for Cash, where for a decade those rogue judges were literally selling children to a private prison by the name of Merkel.
Max, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Annie Dukins, and we reported in other places as well, the incentives that they have, like they get bonuses or something for coming up with positive results of,
yes, I broke that down, I believe, in the beginning of this story, how the incentives are provided by the prisons, mind you, for positive results. It's amazing, Scotty. This is one of the top 2. I say a third would be, put it in the top 3, would be the situation in Mississippi with the entire state prison system being corrupt, and the head of the entire state's prison system, Christopher Epps, facing several hundred years in prison for what he's been doing. He's still turning state's evidence and still pointing out people, and it may reach as far up as the governor for all we know. But we've been keeping an eye on that case as well. Those 3 are really something you should know about, because they really point home to how all of these different parts of the system come together to be modern slavery and human trafficking.
Max, if I may point out or give a shout out to the Free Alabama movement, I've been reading that the governor of Alabama has resigned after a plea agreement in a criminal case where it was involving the theft of funds or the mismanagement of campaign funds that he was directing to this woman that he was having an affair with, and both of them being married. And it's just, I mean, not saying that he shouldn't, cause I've never cheated with another man's wife or anything like that. That's just something since I was a teenager. It was drilled into me. You just don't do that, because that man, some would say have a right to kill you. So that's just something. Yeah. So I'm not trying to minimize the seriousness of that, but he's running a slave plantation. I mean, one of the worst slave systems in the Union, and that would be
Alabama.
Yeah. And so he hasn't gotten in any trouble or forced to resign over the inhumane treatment of the prisoners in Alabama. No, it's because he cheated, and that goes against our Christian values. But slavery, slavery's in the Bible. And so, yeah, we cool with that.
Yeah, this is Jeff Sessions' running buddy out there, as a matter of fact. And we're talking about Alabama, the place that was the last one to stop with convict leasing. And only then, after 145 men, women, and children had been killed in a cave-in who were basically innocent and had been picked up for things like just sitting around without $2 in their pocket, or being in the wrong town, or after hours in a white town, things like that. They were just basically rounding up blacks as servants and slaves in the mine. And that's when they stopped with convict leasing, allegedly, at that time. But also, this governor is in the midst of I think it's $800 million negotiation for new prisons in Alabama. Meanwhile, Alabama is at 200% prison population, and the people are being hunted like rabbits over there to fill these damn prisons where, we've seen the Free Alabama movement's exposure across the entire globe now, that this is one of the worst prisons on earth to be in. So there's a new video that came out that features the Free Alabama movement as well. We talked about it last week, coming out from Al Jazeera. You guys should check it out. I'll share the link as soon as I get a hold of it. But yeah, shout out to the Free Alabama movement. You guys are leading the way, making things happen. Indeed. Is Yohanan get a chance to be with us tonight yet? No? Okay. Well, in the meantime, what I want to do, Scotty, is I want to play this video from David Coleman. And while you get it all set up over there, I'll give a little intro. David Coleman is a South Carolinian, and he's running as the Green Party candidate for Congress in a special election on June 20th, 2017. It's for the South Carolina Congressional District 5. Now, David and I have talked in detail about modern-day slavery and human trafficking. Shout out to Greg Jacoy, who sent him my way. He suggested that he should talk to me. He was very interested in what's going on with the new abolitionist movement because it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it really makes more sense than anything else you're going to hear these days. You know, the truth does make sense. And me and him had a long conversation, and broke down to him what I know as best as I could, and also explained to him what we were looking for. And, you know, we have been here at Black Talk Radio Network, and particularly New Abolitionist Radio, have been pretty influential in national politics over these past 5 years. Everything's from senators to premier organizations to congressmen to mayors have been on this program or follow this program and have been adopting a lot of the ideals and perspectives of the slavery abolitionists. And it's had a big impact on the U.S. in general in the past 5 years. With that being said, Scotty, is it the video queued up? You might be on mute, brother. All right. Seems like we might have lost Scotty for the moment. Well, in the meantime, I'll continue to tell you a little about what I know of David and
I'm sorry, Max. I'm here. I found it. I was just talking and I had myself muted. The listeners could, but those in the conference room couldn't. But I do have the video ready.
All right, no doubt. Well, with that being said, this is the video from David Coleman.
Last September, prisoners across the United States went on strike. 24,000 prisoners per.
I'm sorry, Max. I'm having problems with the control.
Prisoners do this. What was their stated reason? They demand that we end slavery in the United States. We must end slavery in our prisons and repeal the exception clause from the 13th Amendment. I'm David Coleman, and I approved this message because I wrote, shot, edited, and uploaded it myself for free. It's Saturday, April 8th, 2017. In 1865, the United States adopted the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. This amendment abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, thereby officially freeing the remaining enslaved population, which had stood at nearly 4 million before the Civil War. But in 1888, Frederick Douglass, after visiting South Carolina and Georgia, gave a speech in Washington, D.C. on Emancipation Day proclaiming that the Negro is the victim of a cunningly devised swindle, one which paralyzes his energies, suppresses his ambition, and blasts all his hopes. And though he is nominally free, he is actually a slave. I here and now denounce his so-called emancipation as a stupendous fraud. A fraud upon him, a fraud upon the world. And in 2015, State Representative Joe Neal declared at an NAACP event in front of the South Carolina State House, slavery has not gone away. We criticize China for using prison labor to manufacture goods that are then sold cheaply on the world market. We are doing the same thing in South Carolina. So if we abolished slavery, how is it still happening in our prisons? The answer is in the 13th Amendment itself. It reads, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Did you catch it? We abolished slavery except as a punishment for crime. So we can and do enslave prisoners in this country. We must end slavery in our prisons and repeal the exception clause from the 13th Amendment. If you examine the prison industrial complex, you'll find the many ways in which we criminalize people in this country in order to create more prisoners so that we can profit off of their labor and their bodies. For example, a private prison company has a contract with Arizona guaranteeing that its 3 prisons in the state will always be 100% full. How do you keep a prison full of people in a time when crime rates are going down? It's easy. Criminalize normal human activity. We criminalize drugs. See the war on drugs. We criminalize school children. See the school to prison pipeline. We criminalize black and brown skin. See the incarceration rates based on race and immigration status. We criminalize being poor. See the Justice Department report on Ferguson. And then once these people are in prison, we bilk them and their families for money. And of course, we force them to work for free or at third world wages. For example, the prisoners who manufacture South Carolina license plates make somewhere between 35 cents and $1.80 an hour for their work. And if prisoners refuse to work, they are punished with beatings, longer sentences, and solitary confinement. This is slavery, plain and simple. We must end slavery in our prisons and repeal the exception clause from the 13th Amendment. So, how do we atone for these crimes against humanity that I have only begun to describe? First, in Congress, I will call for congressional hearings into the 13th Amendment and how the exception clause has enabled the continuation of slavery. These hearings will discover the full brunt of how our society is built on immoral, disgusting crimes that continue to this day. Second, we need an amendment to the Constitution that repeals this exception clause in the 13th Amendment. This will guarantee that legalized slavery is forever stamped out in the United States. Third, we need to release the unjustly incarcerated. A Brennan Center for Justice study says that we can release nearly 40% of the prison population today because they are behind bars for no compelling public safety reason. Fourth, we need to shut down all private for-profit prisons and immigration detention centers. No one should be profiting on locking other people in cages. This is only a beginning. Our criminal justice system is a sham. From the first moment a person encounters a police officer, all the way to how a former inmate is treated after release. We need a system that rehabilitates and helps people rather than grossly punishes them. Let's work together to end slavery in our prisons. Head on over to votekulma.org to volunteer, donate, and read about my campaign for Congress here in South Carolina's 5th Congressional District. If you care about all human beings, share this video with everyone you know. I'm powered by you, not the corporations. Let's turn SC5 green.
Well, man, Scotty, you gotta love it, right? Gotta freaking love it, man. This is a congressional candidate.
Because when you look at the video, he's showing, I'm a big fan of sources of information so that people don't know you just not making up stuff, because a lot of politicians just make this stuff up. And I'm sure 5 years ago when we started New Abolitionist Radio, even to this day, we still have our skeptics. But when we can point you to the language in the Constitution, provide you with ample evidence of the connecting issues. I love the fact that this is the 3rd, 4th, 5th abolitionist candidate in this modern era that we have come across or somehow have some kind of connection to. And so, but what we got to do is get them elected, you know? What was the brother name in Indiana, Reverend Jamu? We didn't get him elected. What about the other Green Party candidate, Dmitry Chernoff, I believe was his name out of South Carolina? Yeah, we didn't get him elected. So it's time to stop playing these games, especially those most impacted by modern day slavery and human trafficking. We got to come off that Democratic plantation. We got to come off of that Republican plantation. We should not be voting for people based on partisan politics. We should be voting on issues. And give us just a second. We do see you. We should be voting on and what issue is more important than ending slavery. So those are my thoughts.
Electing someone and getting them to run is two different things. We, like you said, have been really grooming a lot of politicians in the past 5 years and throwing them at the system. And of course, they weren't going to make it, we would think, in the very beginning, because this whole concept right now was something that people just couldn't wrap their minds around, but they can now. The time is right now, and it's time for one of these guys to win. And David is the cream of the crop right now. I mean, this brother did not just listen. He went and did the research himself, and then he made up his mind clearly. He did not just, skirt with the surface issues or anything like that. He went into detail. I even think he went even further than Brother Ojabu did, who was original member of the Black Panther Party. So, yeah, my hand's up for David. I am going to stump for this man. And, as anti-political as I am, to say something like that is like, hell just froze over. So we got a caller. Caller, state your name, where you're coming from, and your question or comment, please.
What's up, brothers? Tony Crane again.
Peace, Brother Tony. Welcome back to New Abolition Radio.
Peace. Happily back in the Bronx. I've become a student of history. The thing that popped in my head was this. If there were approximately 4 million slaves in America, what do you say, Circa 1888, I think you said?
1865 was 4 million.
1860, in the 17th century.
Mm-hmm.
So how many Americans were there in total? Approximately.
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a Google away.
My dad said about 10 million. I think that might be about right. So you telling me that? So that means 40% of the population was enslaved in the 17th century in the United States of America. It's crazy.
It was 27,233,000. Total number of slaves 3.9 million.
3.9 million. That's still
of 27 million.
So what's 4 million out of 27 million percentage wise?
Scotty, are you the math man? I don't know, man.
Right. Well, yeah, slaves weren't. That is the thing. Yes, they didn't even count the slaves.
Like 10%. 10%.
Right. Oh man, that's insane.
Actually, more than 10%. More like 11%.
So that's a video. I need to share that video. I want to share that video all over Twitter and YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah, you should. Everybody listening should share that video. We need to get this man elected. This is, like I said, the brother who understands. He has said in no uncertain terms, he's going to call for congressional hearings. That's one of our premier goals on the March on Washington for August 19th in the Millions of Prisoners March on Washington. So he's taking responsibility for that. He's like, if I get elected June 17th, I'm going to call for them personally. And he quoted Frederick Douglass's denouncement of the emancipation. First of all, that speech has been buried in history. Nobody even knows it existed. When we found it through History as a Weapon a few years ago, we recorded it, first people to ever record it on video, and we presented it with evidence to show that what he was saying was happening right now today, like he was a prophet telling us what was going to occur. And if you have never read it, you should. His denouncement in 1888 of the Emancipation Proclamation. And this brother read it. Like, I can't even get people to read it. He read it and then quoted it. So he knows what's going on, and his mind is made up. And that's all we've been asking for. A, consider the argument. B, once you do, make up your damn mind. You know what I mean? Don't pussyfoot around and hang around in the middle, still trying to play the reformist game when you just decided it was slavery. And he has done that. So kudos to him, man. I'll be supporting. Any words on that, brothers?
Yeah, that was about it. Thank you very much.
Indeed, man. Share the video. Share the video. Our next story, I guess, let me pull this up here so I can find it, that we wanted to talk about was Ooh, that video got me going, man. Dude is on point. Gotta love it. Shout out to David Comer. We're going to get you to be a congressman. Then you're going to remember us. And if you don't keep those promises, we're going to get all the brothers together and we're going to visit you. Just saying. Anyway, the next story is something that should be looked at very closely, and it's a harbinger of what's to come. As we just mentioned, one of our main objectives is to get congressional hearings on the 13th Amendment and the effects that this amendment has had on U.S. societies in the last century and a half, and in particular, what it has done to people of color in this country, because they have been decimated to what can only be described as a genocide. Well, now, with all of that going on, senators are getting together to seek some justice system reform themselves, and they're launching a nationwide campaign where they're going to examine every aspect of our criminal justice system. And they're calling this the National Criminal Justice Commission. See, all of these, this is what I say, the stars are aligned. We're asking for congressional hearings for disclosure. We have a group forming now to examine all the aspects. We have all these studies and all this information that is easily available now that has never been known or seen before. So I would say that the S is about to hit the fan, and it probably is going to begin on August 19th with the Millions for Prisoners March on Washington, D.C. If you are not supporting this, and if you're not planning on attending, then you suck, period. I'm just saying. I'm just saying, you suck, period. So here's a story from the Bloomberg and the MP Courier. A bipartisan group of U.S. senators introduced a bill Wednesday to create a National Criminal Justice Commission, which would work for 18 months to review every aspect of the nation's criminal justice system, from policing to prosecution to prisons, and then issue a set of proposed reforms for not only federal, but state and tribal systems as well. The legislation aims to accomplish what a similar commission on law enforcement and administration of justice did when it was created by Lyndon B. Johnson in 1965. That group produced more than 200 recommendations which had lasting impact on the justice system, such as calling for the creation of the 911 emergency call system, improving training for law enforcement, and establishing research organizations such as the Bureau of Justice Statistics. This bill is being introduced by Senators Gary Peters of Michigan, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, wow, John Cornyn of Texas, and 17 co-sponsors as diverse as Republican Senators Orrin Hatch and Thad Conrad, and Democratic Senators Claire McCaskill and Kamala Harris. The proposal also has the backing of numerous law enforcement and civil rights groups, such as the Fraternal Order of Police, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the National Urban League, the NAACP, and the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. They have a quote here that says, "Too many Americans see growing challenges in our justice system," Peters said in a news release, "ranging from overburdened courts and unsustainable incarceration costs to strained relationships between law enforcement and the communities they serve." He said he hoped the new commission would help reduce crime, improve public safety, and promote more equitable criminal justice practices. Both the Fraternal Order of Police and the International Association of Chiefs of Police have been calling for such a commission for years. The goal here, said Chuck Canterbury, the FOP president, is to improve not only policing in the U.S., but all our nation's criminal justice system as a whole. Now, there's a lot to this story, and I don't want to read it all to you here on New Abolitionist Radio. You got about 40% of it there just now. You can read the rest of it. I just want to talk with Scotty, if possible, and anybody else that wants to join the conversation about some of the underlying involvements here, the people that are involved in this, whether or not we could see this as something that's going to help us. If yes, then how? Or is it a whitewash where a bunch of people who have committed crimes against humanity have decided to come together and to find out where they should point fingers at other than themselves? And in the long run, even if they find that these are crimes against humanity, they in no way, shape, or form plan to hold anybody responsible. What do you think, Scotty?
Well, as I was looking over the article myself, I have the same exact issues with the people who are involved. Lindsey Graham, who else on there? Is John McCain on there? I mean, these what's that?
Say you might as well be.
Yeah.
Considering the other names around there.
Yeah, and then it's a bipartisan effort, and I wonder who's sponsoring this. I wonder, look, you got the Fraternal Order of Police and International Association of Chiefs of Police. See, this seems like a Lincoln move, and the reason, Frederick Douglass denounced the Emancipation Proclamation, which we were just talking about earlier, and recognizing it as a stupendous fraud. Now, we'll have to be fair and objective of journalist and researcher, I have to see the bill itself before I make an indictment on it or recommendation on is it worth putting any energy behind or not. So my concerns are the same as yours. Again, Fraternal Order of Police, International Association of Chiefs of Police, they're not going to do anything that they see would be a result of loss of overtime pay, loss or reduction of union paying union members who pay dues. They don't want to see a downsizing of the police force. So again, your concerns are the same as mine about the characters who are involved. I mean, some of these names, they've been in there, I know, since the 1990s and some even longer. And, we could check their records and see they've been in full support of the drug war. And ever since Attorney General Jeff Sessions has talked about bringing it back in those terms, bringing it back, ramping it up, and the statements that he's been making, I haven't heard any of these people in the public take him to task. Actually, I've seen none of these people even talking about it in the news media, period.
This has the potential to do what they say they wanted to do. But here's the problem. Effectively, what they're doing is getting a bunch of people who are the problem together, trying to decide what the problem is and how they should solve the problem when they are the freaking problem.
Hey,
there
man,
are no voice.
A quick thought. Again, you can research this. This smacks of the Confederates being invited to write the 13th Amendment after the conclusion of the Civil War. No different.
Well, I would say this is just the Confederates doing it. That's it. Everybody involved in here is the freaking problem. You got people like Kamala Harris who's talking about, we can't stop this slave labor, fight forest fires with juveniles and prisoners 4,000 strong because it'll cost us $1 billion. People like that with that type of mentality have all gotten together to decide what they're going to do about what they think the problem is. So shout out to my man Muhaddin D. Baha out in Charleston from Black Lives Matter. I remember when he was saying recently, you can't represent people or try to solve a problem when you don't allow them a voice in the conversation. Where's the prisoners' organizations in this conversation? Why are they not a part of this? Where's the prisoners' families organizations? Where's the IWOC? Where's the International Workers Union in this conversation? None of those people are at the table. So this is just slavers sitting around going, how do we make slavery seem less of a problem? Remember, the last time they did this was during the Obama administration. And their findings were, hey, what we plan to do is release 60,000 people over the next 10 years. And then we crunched the numbers on New Abolitionist Radio and was like, damn, y'all, you will have replaced those 60,000 people in a couple of days. So that's no gain at all. You're just making it sound good. 60,000 people, 10 years, they're going to have freedom. And, kudos to the 60,000 people, but you're putting more people than that in prisons on a regular basis. There's almost 750,000 going through prisons every single year. So if you're releasing 60,000, but you don't stop the process of incarceration, then that's just a speed bump along the way with some people getting their freedom. I see that here. It's very one-sided argument, which means that I have a one-sided goal.
Max, we do have Johanna joining us.
Oh, what's up, brother? Johanna? You're just in time, man. I was hoping to be able to get your input on this particular letter. And also shout out to Otis Griffin, who reminded us about this, because we meant to talk about this thing before, but never had the opportunity.
Peace. Good to be here, brothers. Sorry I'm getting in on just what seemed like the second hour only this week, but it's good to be here all the same. We all made it through the week with all the trials and whatnot to get back, so definitely good to be here. I didn't really catch enough of the story. I just signed on to really be able to comment on it. I hear what you're saying as far as the numbers of people that's being let out and kind of the farce that turns out to be when we know that the number of those going right back in is so much higher, and that's something we've covered with, all of the Obama sentences vacated and truncated, and the differences that he made in sentencing and people going home and all these different things. We talked about that over the last several years, that at the same time he was getting the press for letting people out, he was using Eric Holder and the Justice Department to turn around and prosecute and make sure that people served the entire sentences. So, I'm not at all surprised, just continue to be disappointed by, the symbolism that people eat up as reality, and the reality that people ignore is irrelevant. It's going nowhere.
Going nowhere, man. If you got a bunch of rich people together at a conference and their conversation was, how do we help the poor? And in that building, there was not a poor face to be found. That would be a problem, right? Because you're not really representing the people you're talking about. And that's where I see us here with this justice reform system, where you got the police, fraternal order of police and commissioners and prosecutors all coming together to talk about how they're going to fix things that they're doing wrong.
Right. Right. I don't see Neil Franklin, who represents Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, a coalition of retired former slave catchers. Just trying to keep it real, guys. No, hey, you should be offended. But Neil Franklin admitted that he fell for it and that he did harm to his own community. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what was the gist. You go see the YouTube video as he was at a conference, thinking Philly or Baltimore, but I would want him in that room. Neil Franklin, again, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, a bunch of retired judges, former guards, defense attorneys, prosecutors, all who have been talking about ending the drug war. Again, these sort of groups that some of them are 501c3s, like LEAP is. They're not getting invited. They're not in the room. They wasn't in that room with Jeff Sessions and all of the state attorney generals, where he talked about ramping up the drug war and not going soft on people and saying how he didn't believe that cannabis had any medicinal uses. So you're right. Hey, if you're having a poverty conference or confab, then where are those who represent the poor, the homeless? Where are their advocates? So, yeah.
I think this is a whitewash, Scotty. I think that they see the writing on the wall. They see that the future holds our own version here in the United States of Nuremberg trials, where we start holding people accountable for their crimes against humanity. And they're trying to misdirect, cover up, or whitewash their own crimes. There's a story that just came out recently, as a matter of fact, and we won't be able to get into the details of it, but we have posted on New Abolitionist Radio, titled, How We Misunderstand Mass Incarceration. It's long and it's insightful. And in there, they literally point to prosecutors as a premier example of the biggest problem in the United States, where this group of people, the prosecutorial pool, which is represented through a 95% white prosecutorial pool and 83% white men, who have completely demolished the Sixth Amendment and have come to the point now where 95% of all cases end in a plea bargain, which demolishes the Sixth Amendment. And they're one of the driving forces behind mass incarceration. They lack apathy. They're just doing it now for career advancements, so they can say, I've got a 98% or 100% conviction rate. They don't care about human beings, the law, justice, or anything like that at all. Their only purpose is to be this huge assembly line cog ushering people into this prison system. And if people ever started calling for their rights of a trial, it would break the whole damn system down. So check that out on New Abolitionist Radio. And you know, I had a conversation too this time last year on with Janice Graham's show, Our Common Ground. And I talked there with Matthew Fogg, who was the former chief, get it what his title was, but let me see it right here. Matthew Fogg is the former chief deputy U.S. Marshal and special DEA agent whistleblower. And him and I and Janice had a conversation, and he came out and told the truth. He was like, yo, one day I woke up and felt like a slave catcher. Like, that's what I was doing. And he started telling the stories publicly on what they were demanding of him as a slave catcher. And with one conversation, that brother became an abolitionist because all the pieces fit together. He's in the heart of it. He knows what's going on. And all I had to do was come on and point out a few things by asking questions. And before the end of that, he was an abolitionist and running for mayor in Maryland.
He was one of the my first, what I would consider, prominent guests when I first got into broadcasting 9 years ago. Matthew Fogg, when I first launched on Blog Talk Radio, I remember that's how I became introduced to Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, like Johanna pointed out, that Matthew Fogg is a member.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so shout out to Matthew Fogg. We need more men like him out there willing to tell the truth. We've heard it so many times, and people just don't get it. The officers, the people themselves who do it every day are telling you what they're doing, but their voices won't be included in those recommendations, I'm sure. Well, today we have a new segment that we're going to start out in about 10 to 15 minutes or so, too. Looking forward to that. I think the time is right for people to start remembering their past in a way. But there was a video that I wanted to finally, since we got a few minutes extra time, I wanted to give people a chance to hear these words. But before we do that, we're going to take a break. And you're listening to New Abolitionist Radio here on the Black Talk Radio Network with Max Parthas, Yohanan, Alaya, and Scott. Be right back after these messages.
I'm not a writer.
Okay.
Black Talk Radio since 2008, providing new black media for the masses.
Peace and welcome back to New Abolitionist Radio. Here we're talking about modern day slavery and human trafficking, which all stems from the 13th Amendment exception clause to the U.S. Constitution. We were just talking about how they're making a team to come together to make recommendations for change and examining all aspects of the criminal justice system. Well, let me give you an example of the people who are involved in this examination process. We mentioned in there that it was the National Order of Chiefs of Police. Well, we got a message from a chief of police aimed at you. And we'll give our commentary after we play the video. Scotty, the video is on New Abolitionist Radio as well as in our planning session. It's only about a minute or so long, but I want people to hear this with their own ears and, if possible, see it with your own eyes. So if you could just pull that up and cue it up to start, I'd appreciate it. Just for those just tuning in, this is going to be a message from the Lake County Sheriff's Office Community Engagement Unit. And if you're only listening to it, the imagery you'll see you're missing is with these four gentlemen standing next to the chief of police, dressed up like they're in ISIS face masks and sunglasses and full metal gear, big stars on their chests and the guns at their hips, and they just look like terrorists to me, and they sound like terrorists too. Scotty, you got it ready?
I'm Lake County Sheriff Peyton Grinnell. Over the last month or so, I've had several phone calls from citizens in this county concerned about the number of overdoses related to heroin. I want our citizens to know that I am aware of this serious issue. I am asking our residents to please call and let us know if you know of a location that this poison is being pushed out to our streets. You can remain anonymous. To the dealers that are pushing this poison, I have a message for you. We're coming for you. As a matter of fact, our undercover agents have already bought heroin from many of you. We are simply awaiting the arrest warrants to be finalized. So, to the dealers I say, enjoy looking over your shoulder, constantly wondering if today's the day. We come for you. Enjoy trying to sleep tonight, wondering if tonight's the night our SWAT team blows your front door off the hinges. We are coming for you. If our agents can show the nexus between you, the pusher of poison, and the person that overdoses and dies, we will charge you with murder. We are coming for you. Run.
You heard it right there with your own ears. ISIS, dressed up like ISIS at least. Chief police telling you how they're going to come and murder, death, kill you, break down your doors, and if they can find a connection, your ass belongs to them.
Yes? He did not say break down. Let's be accurate. He said blow off.
Blow off, like they did Corinne Gaines. That type of blow off, like they did with Ayanna Stanley Jones' family. That kind of blow off. If you have not, you really should see one of the trilogy of films that connects this all together. It's called Do Not Resist. It shows you exactly what they do with these SWAT teams and their so-called agents finding the information, connecting you. You could end up dead and never have done anything. Sometimes they just do it for the cash. And you know what really struck me as profound, Scotty, is the words that they were using about these drug dealers that they would never dare say to Big Pharma. Big Pharma is just as guilty as anybody else. You know, here's a story from Castle Medical, and I'm just going to read this little quote. It says, tragically, OxyContin abuse does a lot more than land people in the hospital or in jail. It doesn't take much time to overdose on OxyContin, and without immediate attention, it can lead to death. Of the 15,000 American deaths caused by prescription painkillers each year, a number higher than the deaths caused by illegal substances, approximately 1,000 are attributed to OxyContin. So you got these legal substances causing far more deaths than the illegal ones. But these punk BIs are standing there telling you about how they're going to break in this citizen's house if they just find a slight connection and then treat you like murder, death, kill victims where you could get shot in the face from 6 years old and up.
No, man.
Crazy, man.
You mentioned the doctors, but what about the CIA? See, and then when you say something like that, people automatically try to make you look like you wearing a tinfoil hat or something when all the documentation, the historical documentation, the admissions by Congress after certain hearings like COINTELPRO. I mean, what about the CIA? We all know about Gary Webb's work, or should know about Gary Webb's work, and we know Freeway Ricky Ross, the real one, not the former plantation guard, the fake rapper, but the real Freeway Ricky Ross told you where he was getting his dope from his connects through the CIA for all this cheap cocaine. And where do you think this heroin is coming from? It's coming straight from the fields of Afghanistan, where Fox News has it on record and you know, are over there with a video camera showing U.S. troops guarding the field and a captain in the Army telling you that's U.S. policy there. That's the U.S. or the military's policy there, is to let these farmers grow these poppy fields, because that's the only way they can make money. Well, guess what? That's the only way some people in the United States can make money. Let's just keep it real. Is by selling drugs when they can't get jobs. People go into survival mode. It's not a question of morality. It's a question of reality, you know? So throw the CIA in there. Are they going to be fighting each other? You know, I know the CIA and the Pentagon train their different proxies in Syria, and at one time they were fighting each other and they had to work that out. But you know, are we going to see that kind of war here in the United States? I mean, all of this stuff is documented. I don't expect everybody to know it, because everybody doesn't subscribe and follow the news like I do. But I tell you, man, it's all a hypocrisy. And I know he's not considering those sources. So I'm not trying to hear it. First of all, I feel like I think this is sort of like the pro-choice argument over abortion. My body, my decision. If I'm an adult, then that's between me. You know, how come I can't get no cannabis prescribed from my doctor? Well, of course, in many states, that's now become reality. But Jeff Sessions, again, talking about even rolling that back in yet. You know, we haven't heard of any raids in those states that have legalized yet, but it could be coming down the pipe. Johanna.
I mean, I don't know. It's difficult not to start dropping curse words, man, honestly, because it's just the propaganda of it, the intimidation tactics, and it has nothing to do with what the actual policy is, number one. So to bring up the opioid addictions and speak on the heroin situation specifically, I mean, they know that they're not talking about the white middle class, white lower middle class, white poor, white rich. They're not talking about those people. They're basically doing a standoff, a show off in ninja gear, trying to intimidate the same people that they've been terrorizing and hyper policing and rounding up and wrangling and killing in the street, beating, raping, stealing from. I mean, we just talked about the civil asset forfeiture that's brought in over $4 billion. And out of that, 3.2 billion of it had nothing to do with any person even being able to be charged for a crime. So when I see, you know, this basically looks to me like a KKK commercial, where instead of wearing white hoods and white robes, they just put on their other outfits and put on black ski masks and black goggles and black SWAT outfits and big gold stars on their chest, which is the exact same gold star that their great grandfathers wore when they were slave catching. So, I mean, the revenue agents, the tax collectors, the highway robbers, the slave catchers. This is all I see. I don't see anything that says to me, they want to tell you when they get caught doing some wrong, when they kill somebody, when they kill a child, an Ayanna Jones, when they kill a 92-year-old grandmother, a Pearly Golden, kick in the front door, go in and shoot the old lady sitting in the recliner and say, oh, we served a warrant at the wrong house. You know, and then the taxpayers pay $1.2 million, $1.4 million to buy it off, to buy the piece. Then they say, we're going to do more training. We're going to do more sensitivity training, more community interaction. We're going to engage the people instead of always being seen as the adversary. We're going to work with these communities and blah, 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 blah. But this is the shit you see them do of their own free will. And so that was under the last 8 years under, as we just talked about in the last story, perceived as friendly, as progressive, as liberal. He's a black guy, Obama administration with black minions at his disposal, like an Eric Holder, to help him through the Fast and Furious scandal, where you got the deal that the DEA had with the Sinaloa cartel getting caught up in bringing drugs and guns into the country. That got swept under the rug, basically, under a black president. So this is the way that they're showing you what they'll do under the Trump administration. Hey, we can put back on or knock what they call a jump out boys gear and threaten you to, how's it going to feel when you're waiting at night for us to knock in your door? So then you'd be like the brother where they knocked in his door and he shot him dead, and then they took him and tried him for murder because he was an innocent man, and they just kicked in the wrong door, and hell, he defended himself and shot one of them dead. That shit wasn't so cute and so cool then, was it? When they getting shot out people's front door, then they mad. So the whole thing to me is out of control, totally irresponsible. And if this is the kind of stance that they want to take against the citizens that they keep saying they want to protect and serve, and they want to engage, and they want to work with, and they want to be a part of the community, and this is what they bring to the table, then don't be pissed off when you get citizens to come out and pop off and start kicking your ass, because this is what you're telling them to expect.
Yeah, and it goes back again to that slave catcher mentality. All you see is nails and you're a hammer. So let's go kill everything. That's how we solve the drug problem. That's how we deal with addiction. We just go break down people's doors, and shoot people up, and put everybody's lives in danger. And all we need is a little shred of evidence. It's that, if you weren't hunting human beings for doing with their body what they wanted to do with it, you wouldn't have this freaking problem, would you? But it's okay for the big pharma to do it. That's perfectly fine. The corporate execs can sit up there in the high rises and profit on suffering that exceeds that which you have decided to go murder, death, kill about. Exceeds it, but they can do it unmolested. That's not the problem. The problem is the guy over there who has no job, no education, no chance for a future, and has been pushed into a position where he has nothing left to lose but his freedom, and is putting it at risk to make some money on something that exists with or without him.
Max, and Johanna, I just had a quick thought. We might need to run those numbers when they say a high number, and we know they talking about white people because we've been seeing in the media white people who then OD laying in the van and showing their dead bodies no dignity at all. I wonder if they family signed off on having, what if the kids grow up and come across that photo? I just really thought about that, but then we had to check the numbers because the media can make it seem like it's a lot of people, dying or whatever. And then that may not be the case because I'm a member of Tricky Dicky. Richard Nixon. And that's the same argument where he was saying that people was dying of heroin when in fact more people was dying falling downstairs in accidents, household accidents than were overdosing. But he used that as the selling point to start the drug war. Check the record, people. Check the facts.
Yeah, you're on point with it, Scotty Reed. You're on point with it. See, once you become an abolitionist, you start looking at all of this stuff in a whole new light. And it really stands out much more clearer for you than it did before when you were a reformist who just thought, something's wrong and I don't really know what it is. So everybody's talking about reform. Yeah, I got to be a reformist. Yeah. You see it in a whole different way. See, in your mind, when you stop thinking this is okay and you start seeing it as a crime against humanity to which people need to be prosecuted for and to which people need to be freed about, that's a whole different viewpoint. And you can't even apply the same arguments that you used as a reformist as a abolitionist. It's a whole different perspective. But we're coming up on a quarter after mark, and we got this new segment, Scotty. We really should get into it, man. I've been looking forward to this. As I said, we document history. We were a major factor in the change of perspective in regards to who led the abolitionist movement. With us, we have shown hundreds of black actors involved in their own freedom and leading the way at every angle, whereas those white counterparts, although involved, were usually involved but not the leaders of the movement. So the abolitionist movement, contrary to popular beliefs, was a black-led movement. And we proved it right here on New Abolitionist Radio. Well, here's our newest one, and this is called For Freedom's Sake, A History of Rebellion. And we're going to start it with the Stono Rebellion. Shall I, Scotty? I'll take that as a yes. All right.
Sorry, Max. I'm again still having audio issues, and I'm actually passing audio from 2 different computers. So without getting into all of what I'm dealing with, what are you asking me? Do we need an audio file to play?
Well, if you want one, that would be nice. I was asking if I should begin this new segment now, or unless you want to add something else.
Yes,
okay,
of course.
Yeah, if you have an audio file and you want to play it, I mean, this is something brand new, and it is the anniversary of the Civil War. It began today.
I'll see if while you started, and I'll see if I can find a short clip on YouTube.
All right, sounds good, brother. All right, new segment from New Abolitionist Radio for freedom's sake, a history of rebellion. Stono Rebellion, 1739. The Stono Rebellion was the largest slave revolt ever staged in the 13 colonies. On Sunday, September 9th, 1739, a day free of labor, with about 20 slaves under the leadership of a man named Jemmy, provided whites with a painful lesson on the African desire for liberty. Many members of the group were seasoned soldiers, either from the Yamasee War or from their experience in their homes in Angola, where they were captured and sold and had been trained in the use of weapons. They gathered at the Stono River and raided a warehouse-like store, Hutchinson's, executing the white owners and placing their victims' heads on the store's front steps for all to see. They moved on to other houses in the area, killing the occupants and burning the structures, marching through the colony towards St. Augustine, Florida, where under Spanish law they would be free. As the march proceeded, not all slaves joined the insurrection. In fact, some hung back and actually helped hide their masters. But many were drawn to it, and the insurrectionists soon numbered around 100. They paraded down King's Highway, according to sources, carrying banners and shouting liberty, Lukongo in their native Kigongo, a word that would have expressed the English ideals embodied in liberty and perhaps salvation. The slaves fought off for more than a week before the colonists rallied and killed most of the rebels, although some very likely reached Fort Mosey. Even after colonial forces crushed the Stono uprisings, outbreaks occurred, including the very next year when South Carolina executed at least 50 additional rebel slaves. After the Stono Rebellion, South Carolina authorities moved to reduce provocations for rebellion. Masters, for example, were penalized for imposing excessive work or brutal punishments of slaves, and a school was started so that slaves could learn Christian doctrine. In a colony that already had more blacks than whites, the Assembly also imposed a prohibitive duty on the importation of new slaves from Africa and the West Indies. Authorities also tightened control over the enslaved. The Assembly enacted a new law requiring a ratio of 1 white for every 10 blacks on any plantation, and passed the Negro Act of 1740, which prohibited enslaved people from growing their food, assembling in groups, earning money they, rather than their owners, could return, or learning to read. And here at New Abolitionist Radio, we remember the Stono Rebellion.
A slave, especially under these circumstances, wants to survive, wants to be free. And it also doesn't take much imagination to understand the anger of being enslaved, of being held against your will, seeing your loved ones subjected to treatment that no human beings ought to experience.
The first time, your punishment was whipping. If you ran away a second time, there would be an R branded on your right cheek. The third time, one of your ears would be severed, and another R would be burned onto your left cheek for runaway. And if you ran away a fourth time, if you were a man, the punishment was castration.
Gruesome punishments that had been familiar in England were exaggerated in the slave society. The planter had to calculate that I can punish this person even if they die. I can import new people from West Africa, and I'm making so much money in this process that I can afford to do it.
The inhumane treatment says a lot. That indeed they're resisting their enslavement, that like any other human being whose rights and opportunities are being taken away, that they're going to resist and fight back.
Burning down barns was something that occurred regularly and increased during harvest time when the workload was heaviest. Poisoning could not be caught readily, and it was often something that was feared by whites even when it didn't exist.
One symptom of their fear was that there was a law that white men had to carry guns when they went to church. Sunday was the only day off for enslaved people. And so the white folks feared that the uprising, if it ever came, would happen on Sunday when all the whites were gathered in church. Therefore, the white men were required to carry their guns to church.
It was on a Saturday night, September 1739. It was a work crew. Many of them are Angolans, including a man named Jemmy, who becomes the leader.
The fated Sunday finally came on the Stono River, southwest of Charleston. And they got to a store and broke in, and they killed a Mr. Hutchinson, decapitated him and put his head on a pole and cleared out his store of guns.
It happens in harvest time, which is the time when blacks are being worked the hardest. It also happens in malaria time, and there is an epidemic going on in Charleston, which has virtually shut down the town.
They must have realized that they couldn't possibly take over the area and drive out the Europeans. But they did recognize the possibility that if they took common action as soldiers, they might be able to escape.
The governor of Florida had already issued a decree that any African who was a slave who made it to Florida would be free, and there was indeed a colony there of ex-slaves.
There is this African manned fortification, and when the Stono Rebellion breaks out, it becomes clear that what these people are trying to do is to reach Fort Mose.
People begin to join them. They burn successive plantations, kill some of the white people living there, draw some of the blacks with them. Others are afraid to join in and refuse to go. But unfortunately for them, they meet the lieutenant governor riding north.
They gave chase to him, but he was able to sound the alarm. And then, of course, a posse is formed, and they set out after this group of Africans.
It's an amazing moment. If they had been able to take him hostage, who knows what the dynamics would have been. These people are pursued south for a day or two. If they had been able to go another 24 or 48 hours so that more people could have joined them, their strength would have been greater. And who knows what the prospects would have been.
And the whites came on them. They surrounded these men and they fired on them. A lot of them were scattered. Many of them were killed.
Some of them escaped into the swamp, but those that they did capture, they chopped their heads off and put their heads on poles leading out down what is today US 17 out of Charleston to send a message to the other Africans. This is what will happen to you if you rebel.
After the Stonewall Rebellion, all of the separate laws governing slavery were consolidated into a single code. This black code restricted the movement of black people and regulated almost every aspect of the lives of the enslaved.
The crushing of the Stonewall Rebellion was a tragedy. To me, these people were freedom fighters. Someone like Jimmy, newly arrived from Angola, is able to show others around him that this is not the only way to live. This can change this time, but it will change in the future.
Under the most inhumane conditions that you can possibly imagine, people were able to maintain their human dignity. It gives you some insight into the resilience of the human spirit, that it is possible for human beings to make the decision, I will not be defeated.
When slavery and the making of America continues after the...
All right, there you go. Salute the Stonewall Rebellion. I think my version was better than theirs, though. But no doubt, man, that's the launch of our new segment. Stonewall Rebellion began what we know as the Black Codes, and what we know as the Black Codes have been repeated in 2017's era, where we see it with the stop and frisk and the profile.
Yeah, I was about to say that black codes, different periods, because some people call the Jim Crow laws black codes. But my research shows the first black codes was in the 1600s in the Virginia colony, which also restricted the rights of black people, free black people whose history they love to hide. But going to the Stonewall Rebellion, as they stated, they were trying to reach those Seminoles, because there was an alliance. Look up, I think his name is John Horse, who was a African, and how they were adopted into these Indian tribes, and they took on that way of life. Well, really, they were forced to live in the swamps, but man, how they battled Andrew Jackson, to a standstill. Andrew Jackson, that's another reason why they love him, because he even disobeyed orders to pursue people. Later, they did the same thing and had went to Florida. So, I mean, it's important to study history and to know history, but if they were just able to organize a little bit better, or like they said, had just been able to catch that lieutenant governor, who knows, man, and then picked up. And then when you hear the numbers, like how they outnumbered the colonists back then, I was like, wow, fear is a very powerful tool. Fear and propaganda is a very powerful tool, where if every victim of slavery back then and their allies had all just said, you know what, we drawn this line in the land, and if slavery ends today by any means necessary. Wow. The history could have turned out different, but we study history, to find out where things went wrong so we can plan for the future.
Indeed, brother. Indeed. We're students of history here, and we try to help you to understand history as well, the listener, to understand the history of what we've been through, results, and all the stuff we've had to endure. And for those that are interested, the slave codes in their entirety are hosted on New Abolitionist Radio, what was called the Negro Act of 1740. Well, we're coming up on our next segment, and hopefully I can get Yohanan to do it for us tonight. I know he doesn't prefer this particular segment, and I understand why. I think we all do, but it is one that needs to be told. It is both empowering and victorious to a certain degree when you understand that these are people who have gained freedom, who have been railroaded into our prison systems, spending anything from a few years to 40 some odd years of their lives behind bars, innocent the entire time. So we have our rider of the 21st Century Underground Railroad this week, who is Roosevelt Glenn. And he was convicted for 89 rape case, which he has been exonerated for after serving 16 years in prison. Johanna?
I was going to say I have myself muted. Yeah, I don't mind doing the segments. I mean, it's just we all know what it is, the bull that creates these situations. And I think just as frustrated with the system and, you know, the literally just that, the system. It's a system. It's not one-off situations. It's not randoms or outliers or just this strange anomaly that occurred. I mean, it's the system. So even if we're looking at a situation where we know that we've got 2.3 million incarcerated, if you just allow for an error factor of what, 2%, 3%, you know, we're talking about, I mean, a ridiculous number of people that I just see too much apathy. I just see too much going on elsewise in the community. And when I hear people, you know, want to focus on African philosophy and we want to talk about the great teachers and our linear thinking inspired by European dogma and paradigm of the duality of all this shit up in the moon, stars, skies, and purple shoes, horseshoes, and whatever the hell. But you cannot get people to engage over this type of a situation. So that's really what be my frustration. I mean, the stories are pissed me off, of course, and it is what it is. And I'm just glad for these people that they get out and we could talk about it and all of that. But I'm just trying to figure out why black folks like to travel the stars and talk about all this theory of the philosophy of the ancient cometicisms of the man. You could get snatched today. And it'd be nothing we can do to help you, no more than we could help these people that's finally getting out. And it seems like it don't matter until it is you. So that's what really be my frustration for anybody that always wonder why does Johanna flip out on this, on these segments. But we got another brother that made it out through the Underground Railroad. Man exonerated based on DNA mixture after serving 16 years. And this is an interesting timing for this particular story, because the new Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, just came out and said this last week that he was going to put an end to forensic investigation, the investigation into the forensic investigation wing of the DOJ and federal investigations overall. And, you know, we just found out over the last couple of years how many they had to cancel out the hair investigations because that was all fouled up and people lying on the stand as so-called experts. And so, I mean, we talked about the Annie Dukin situation. I mean, all of this shows how much corruption and incompetence is in the system, just built into the system and throwing people in prisons. And so this brother got out behind DNA, which if Sessions has his way, could very well be a thing of the past soon. So 2 men served decades behind bars for a brutal 1989 gang rape have both been released and exonerated based on complex DNA mixture interpretation. The rape charge and conviction of Roosevelt Glenn, which had kept him in prison for 16 years, was tossed out last week by an Indiana Superior Court judge. The court finds that newly discovered evidence exists which entitles Roosevelt Glenn to a new trial. The court finds the state is unable to retry Roosevelt Glenn, ruled Honorable T. Edward Page on January 30th. The court concludes that the criminal charges against Glenn should be dismissed. Glenn was convicted of a Class A rape felony in 1993 and sentenced to 35 years in prison. He was released in 2009 after court testimony determined that one of the semen stains presented as evidence at trial potentially included the profile of all Caucasians by blood type. Glenn and co-defendant Daryl Pinkins had been convicted of the brutal gang rape partly on hair evidence and since disproven serology methods. The rape occurred when a group of assailants bumped a woman's car at a red light and then assaulted her repeatedly once she got out of her vehicle December 7, 1989. The victim's clothes had a mixture of DNA and the attackers left behind a pair of work coveralls. Those work coveralls had been reported stolen from Pinkins' co-worker's car the night before the rape. The first trial for Pinkins and Glenn ended in a mistrial in 1990 based on DNA evidence that excluded them as contributors to the mixture. Serology at the second trial, including blood types and other biomarkers, led to their conviction, said Greg Hampikian, a professor of biology and criminal justice at Boise State University, in an interview last year with Forensic Magazine. Pinkins, who was sentenced to 65 years in prison, and Glenn maintained their innocence behind bars. Professor Francis Watson at the Indiana University McKinney Law School Wrongful Conviction Clinic started investigating the case and conviction in 1999, and Hampikian joined the effort in 2006. Probabilistic genotyping and the newest method of DNA mixture analysis made the breakthrough in the case, Hampikian said. True Allele, a big data analysis of complex mixed matches of genetic material, was consulted in 2014. The software made by the Pittsburgh-based Cybergenetics resulted in 5 unidentified genotypes, none of which matched the 3 defendants who had initially been arrested for the gang rape. It was tragic that failed DNA methods ignored the evidence, inflicting so much needless suffering on these men and their families for so many years, said Mark Perlin, the creator of True Allele. So much more can be done with DNA to find the truth. Pinkins was released in April 25th, 2016. No other arrests have been made in the 1989 rape. It's a horror story that these men were convicted in the first place, Hampikian said. The DNA test ordered by the state in 1990 should have ended it before there was a trial. These men were excluded by science from the very beginning. And I might just add that whoever actually did it has still been on the streets as far as we know. So salute to this brother for making his way back out. That's a long road. 16 years he served as a wrong man, and then also to his friend. So Roosevelt Glenn is out now, and then also his partner who also served. He was let out in 2016. So welcome back to the world. Salute.
Welcome to freedom, brother. Welcome to freedom. Whew. Man,
yeah, man.
These stories are necessary. People need to know. They need to know that what's happening in these courts. The 5% you do get a trial is a railroad usually. What did Brian Stevenson said, and I hate to misquote him, but basically said they treat you better if you're guilty and rich than if you're innocent and poor.
I would like to just make a request to our listening audience. If you know how to put alerts out, like for the type of news or items or topics that you are interested in, want to get notification, but do one for jury nullification, which in this country has its roots, again, on the Underground Railroad, where people were refusing to convict people on the charges related to the Fugitive Slave Act. Okay, but yet, even though it's 5%, like Max said, when they go to trial, we still have people voting them guilty. So again, we got a lot of work to do in educating people on how to use jury nullification. Don't try to get out the jury pool. Try to get in the jury pool. And then if you may be the lone abolitionist in that jury box, and when they come up for a non-violent, victimless crime, which can cover drugs and what they call the sex industry, again, if we're going to talk about pro-choice and people can have abortions because it's their bodies and it's between them and their doctors, well, again, I don't mean to sound facetious, but it should be between these people, up to them what they put into their bodies. So it's not a question of morality, it's a question of reality. You don't have the right to tell other people. So stop it, again, repeating that slogan or that propaganda that we live in one of the freest countries on the face of the planet. That is untrue. How can that be true when you have the world's largest prison slave population? See, the United States is just so full of contradictions. I hear people say that about the Bible, but it is really true about real U.S. history and that what they teach in school and push out through their propaganda airwaves and platforms. So
they're at the same time the most successful nation and the biggest failure.
Right. Max, just to let you know, we do got one more segment. I do have a couple of clips I want to play for our abolitionists in profile, but Mind, Body, and Spirit Radio will be on live. I thought they might end up canceling it because of some mix up behind the scene, but I do need to reset. So I want to get off about 5 minutes early so I can do a reset. But I am ready to do our abolitionist profile. But was everybody done speaking?
I would just like to mention one thing. I just got in some breaking news, just as I did last week, and we'll probably lead next week with the story. But apparently New Jersey is opening its first rehab prison, and they say things like it allows nonviolent criminals to opt out for treatment instead of jail time, but your treatment happens in a jail. So the next generation of prison for profit has been begun. We'll talk about that next week.
I forgot his name, the guy running for Congress. Forgive me. I got to learn his name, and I'm sure I will, as we'll have him on the program next week. But what's his name? He talked about this, criminalizing people behavior. Criminalizing. That's why they get to call them criminals. That's why the exception clause is in the 13th Amendment. So, yeah.
All right. Well, with that being said, we're moving on to the clips we have available for our abolitionists in profile this week here on New Abolitionist Radio.
Our abolitionist in profile this week is Mary Prince, born in 1788 and transitioned in 1833. The first woman to present a petition to Parliament. Mary Prince was born in 1788 to an enslaved family in Bermuda. She was sold to a number of brutal owners and suffered from terrible treatment. Prince ended up in Antigua belonging to the Wood family. In December 1826, she married Daniel James, a former slave who had bought his freedom and worked as a carpenter and a cooper. For this act, she was severely beaten by her master. In 1828, she traveled to England with her owners. She eventually ran away and found freedom, but only in England, and she could not return to her husband. Mary campaigned against slavery, working alongside the Anti-Slavery Society and taking employment with Thomas Pringle, an abolitionist writer and secretary of the Anti-Slavery Society. She became the first woman to present an anti-slavery petition to Parliament and the first black woman to write and publish an autobiography. The history of Mary Prince. Wow, we got to send this to some of those black filmmakers out there that have access to the silver screen. But the first black woman to write and publish an autobiography, the history of Mary Prince, a West Indian slave. The book was a key part of the anti-slavery campaign. It made people in Britain aware that although the slave trade had been made illegal, the horrors of life on the plantation continued for so many people. Extracts from Mary Prince's account are provided, so I want to go into those from her autobiography.
We follow my mother to the marketplace. At length, the vendue master, who was to offer us for sale like sheep or cattle, arrived and asked my mother which was the eldest. She said nothing, but pointed to me. He took me by the hand and led me into the middle of the street, and turning me slowly round, exposed me to the view of those who attend the venue. I was soon surrounded by strange men who examined and handled me in the same manner that a butcher would a calf or a lamb he was about to purchase. The bidding started at just a few pounds and gradually rose to 57. The people who stood by said that I had fetched a great sum for so young a slave. I then saw my sisters led forth and sold to different owners. When the sale was over, my mother hugged and kissed us and mourned over us, begging us to keep a good heart. It was a sad parting. One went one way, one another. The next morning, my mistress set about instructing me in my task. She taught me to do all sorts of household work. She taught me how could I ever forget it? The exact difference between the rope and the whip when applied to my naked body by her own cruel hand. And there was scarcely any punishment more dreadful than the blows received on my face and head from her hard, heavy fist. She was a fearful woman and a savage mistress to her slaves. I was immediately sent to work in the salt water with the rest of the slaves. I was given a half barrel and a shovel and had to stand up to my knees in the water from 4 o'clock in the morning till 9, when we were given some Indian corn boiled in water. We were then called again to our task and worked through the heat of the day, the sun flaming upon our heads like fire and raising salt blisters in those parts which were not completely covered. Our feet and legs, from standing in the salt water for so many hours, soon became full of dreadful boils, which eat down in some cases to the bone. We came home at 12, ate our corn soup as fast as we could, and went back to our employment until dark at night. We slept in long shed, divided into narrow slips, boards fitted upon stakes, driven into the ground, without mat or covering, were our only beds.
New Abolitionist Radio salutes Mary Prince, born 1788, 1833, the first woman to present a petition to Parliament and the first Black woman to publish an autobiography. Salute.
Salute. Mary Prince. Indeed, man.
Yeah.
Segments, dude. Love.
Spike Lee, if you listening, Oprah Winfrey, if you listening, any of Ava DuVernay, Netflix, go ahead and finance this film right here, her autobiography. And as I was listening to that, as I have stated in the past, that all the horrors that we hear about slavery pre-1865 are pretty much the same coming off the prison plantations, post 1865 slavery and human trafficking. And that's what really stood out to me in hearing the dramatic presentation from her autobiography about how they were treated.
Yeah, my favorite parts of the evening is these segments where we visit history and the present and the people who made things happen in such a way. Salute once again. Well, it's our last 5 minutes of the program. I have a couple of announcements, and I just put them on New Abolitionist Radio Facebook page. You'll be able to go ahead and check it out. Remember to support the March, Millions of Prisoners March on Washington, August 19th. You can go to imweubuntu.com in order to sign up yourself or your group, and just show your solidarity. And also on May 13th, there will be the 5th annual spoken word gala, in which I will be the recipient of the Will Bell Humanitarian Award. You should get tickets while they're still available. And historically speaking, coming up on the 12th or the 29th of April, I'll be in Asheville working with the Quakers there in a viewing of the 13th and a discussion with Max Parthas. So if you're in the Asheville area on the 29th, check me out there and we'll watch the 13th and then we'll talk about it together. Scotty?
Yeah, let's go into our final comments. I'll go ahead and start it off, but I just want to reiterate how important it is that people from all walks of life that are impacted by modern day slavery and human trafficking, even if you haven't done time on a prison plantation, chances are you know someone, perhaps someone in your family, perhaps several people in your family who have, so you are affected. So there is a need for these public displays of your passion, public displays of your numbers and strength. And so that should equate millions of people by that wide definition that I gave. You know, that's why it's you know, some of the family organizations, you know, representing these prisoners are participating. So definitely you want to show up for the Millions for Prisoners Human Rights March. You can just Google that and you'll find links to the information that you need to give you more information. Again, that's on August the 19th, 2013, I believe. Activities officially begin at 12 and run all the way up to about 5 p.m. on the Washington Mall, I believe is what it's called. But those are my final comments. Become an abolitionist.
Peace to the abolitionists. Death to the oppressors.
Sweet and simple, man. I guess I'll say it the same way. I'll quote Dennis Waitley, since it's National Poetry Month. There are two primary choices in life: to accept conditions as they exist or accept the responsibility for changing them. And remember, abolition is the reason for a revolution, so we can finally know some peace. Peace.
Rise up, rise up.